Be me, mid-30s, career woman, manager at one of the biggest beer companies in the region. I run part of the marketing and events division. Basically, the teams that make sure our beer shows up at festivals, bars, sports events, nightclubs, you name it. It's a man's world. Beer sales reps are mostly dudes. Logistics guys are all dudes. Event managers, mostly dudes. And me, the token woman at the table, the one they sometimes wheel out to say, "See? We're progressive." I didn't stumble into this job. At least, that's what I like to tell myself. I did the whole business school track, got my master's in marketing, bounced through internships at agencies, spent plenty of time fetching coffee for guys who somehow always got promoted twice as fast, usually because they played golf with the boss. Even back at uni, I noticed beer companies, sports companies, all the fun industries, crawling with guys. Women ended up in HR or comms, tucked away from the real action. When I finally landed my spot here, I told myself it was because I outperformed everyone. I worked late, volunteered for the travel nobody wanted, pushed harder than the rest. That's how I like to frame it. But if I'm being brutally honest, I was also the only woman in the candidate pool, and the company had just announced a whole diversity push. Looking back, I can't exactly pretend that didn't grease the wheels. Still, at the time, I convinced myself it was merit. And if anyone hinted otherwise, I snapped back because I'd heard enough of "she's just here because she's a woman." So yeah, sitting at that boardroom table as the only woman, I carried that chip on my shoulder. But after a while I thought, maybe that's exactly why I'm here. If I'd spent my whole career pissed off about how men gatekept this industry, maybe this was how I could finally flip it. So I made it my mission. Not just to hire more women, but to prove something. To prove that women weren't just as capable as the men around me, but more capable. That all the smug, old school guys at the table would eat their words once they saw how much better we could run things. I even had a picture in my head of the big moment Oktoberfest, our crown jewel event of the year. Hundreds of thousands of people, mountains of beer, every distributor and client watching closely. If I could field a team of mostly women to pull off a flawless Oktoberfest, it would shut the guys up once and for all, probably make huge news as well. That was the dream, my revolution in one weekend. But revolutions don't happen overnight, so I started building piece by piece. Whenever we needed new hires, interns, or coordinators, I pushed for women. Didn't matter if they weren't the strongest resume in the pile. I'd tell myself, that's only because they never had the chance before. I set up a Young Women in Marketing internship program. I recruited aggressively, job fairs, mixers, networking events. If a woman seemed remotely enthusiastic about branding or events, I'd say, "Send me your CV, I'll find you something." I wanted to fill our teams with new energy, new ideas, people who weren't just the same old frat boy types who think beer marketing equals football and bikini models. And when I talked about it in meetings, I dressed it up with numbers. Diverse teams perform better. A stat I'd half remembered from some article. My bosses didn't push back much, probably because they liked the optics. A few of the guys in my department rolled their eyes, but they didn't dare say anything directly. Still, I heard the whispers. Comments like, "She's just hiring her girlfriends," or "She doesn't care about results, just quotas." One guy even joked, "If I change my LinkedIn pronouns, maybe she'll promote me." I laughed it off in the moment, but inside, I was livid. I wasn't being biased. I was fixing a bias. I was balancing the scales. That's what I told myself anyway. Because yes, sometimes I'd look at the stack of resumes and see that the best candidates were men. Experienced men, qualified men. Guys who had already run major events, managed budgets, proven themselves in the industry. And then next to them, I'd see a woman who wasn't as strong on paper. Maybe she'd never run a big event before. Maybe her Excel skills were shaky. Maybe her work history was patchy. But on her CV, she had things like led campus women in business society, or organized local marches for gender equality. She'd taken electives in gender studies, volunteered at diversity nonprofits, spoken on panels about breaking barriers. To me, that said more about her potential than another 5 years of relevant industry experience ever could. So I'd pass over the men who were objectively more qualified and pick her instead. Every time, I told myself it was the right thing, that the long-term payoff, proving women like her could thrive here would be worth it. I was convinced I was building something revolutionary, a new era in beer marketing, one where women like me wouldn't be the exception, we'd be the standard. 3 months later, my team was looking the way I'd imagined. Out of the 12 people directly under me, 8 were women. Fresh hires, interns, coordinators, junior managers. You could feel the difference when you walked into our floor of the office. Brighter, friendlier, way less of that bro locker room vibe. For the first time, I thought, this actually looks like progress, and Oktoberfest, less than 2 months away. The clock was ticking, but I felt good. My dream team was in place. All that was left was to prove what I already knew, that women could run circles around the men in this industry, but little cracks started to show. First, the logistics disaster. One of my new hires, a woman I'd brought in straight out of a grad program, was in charge of organizing refrigerated trucks for a smaller regional beer festival. Simple task. She forgot. The kegs sat in storage overnight, and by the time they hit the venue, they were warm. We had furious clients calling, attendees blasting us on Instagram, even a distributor threatening to back out of future events. I covered for her in the debrief. Told my boss it was a miscommunication, told the team mistakes happen. Inside, I was irritated, but I reassured myself she just needed more training. Men screw up too, don't they? Why is it only noticed when a woman does? Then came the marketing misfire. Another hire, a young, super passionate woman who'd impressed me with her activism background, pitched a campaign built around beer equals liberation. Billboards, social media posts, the whole thing dripping in feminist messaging. I greenlit it, excited to break the mold. It bombed. Our male customer base, the bread and butter of beer sales, mocked it online. Sales took a noticeable dip in that region. And even some of the women in the office said it felt a little forced. I told myself, that's just resistance to change. The old demographic isn't ready for it yet. They'll get there. Then there was the HR drama. One of my coordinators filed a harassment complaint against a bar manager we worked with. I backed her immediately because I wanted her to feel supported. But after a full investigation, nothing stuck. The incident turned out to be little more than an offhand joke the guy made while loading kegs. Still, the damage was done. That venue, one of our bigger partners, started dragging its feet on renewals. My bosses weren't thrilled. I told myself, at least we're holding men accountable now. It's worth it. Meanwhile, I couldn't help noticing. The men on my team were carrying the load. They were the ones staying late, redoing botched reports, smoothing over angry clients. I saw it, but I told myself, well, that's what teamwork is. Women bring the ideas, men can handle the grunt work. Balance, right? But then came the first real confrontation. We were in a meeting about a delayed sponsorship rollout, yet another project that had gone sideways because of missed deadlines. I was trying to keep it positive to steer the conversation towards solutions, when one of the senior guys, Keith, suddenly snapped. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes burning into me. Why do I have to redo 3 people's work just because you think diversity matters more than results? The room went dead silent. You could feel the oxygen vanish. Everyone froze. I forced a smile, trying to brush it off. That's not what's happening here. We're a team, and... He cut me off. No, that's exactly what's happening. I stayed here until 11 last night, redoing the event deck, because 2 of your new hires couldn't format a client presentation without breaking the numbers. Keith slapped the papers in front of him. This isn't empowerment, it's babysitting. A couple of the women on the team immediately jumped in. One of them, my intern, snapped back, wow, maybe if you actually mentored people instead of tearing them down, they wouldn't struggle so much. Another chimed in, yeah, you're just intimidated because women are finally getting a chance in this industry. Keith laughed, sharp, bitter. Intimidated? Please. I don't care who I work with. I care about getting things done, and right now, every major mistake is coming from the same place. That stung. I could feel my face heating. Okay, that's enough. You're being unprofessional, I shot back. But he wasn't done. Unprofessional is watching clients walk away because people don't know how to do the job they were hired for. Unprofessional is watching you pass over qualified people because they don't fit your little quota experiment. I snapped. Excuse me? This isn't about quotas. This is about balance. About fixing a system that's been unfair for decades. Joshua, one of the guys, muttered under his breath. Not loud enough to be a direct challenge, but I caught it. Doesn't feel very balanced when 5 of us are doing 12 people's work. That made one of the women bristle. Maybe you just can't handle women in charge. The tension was electric, crackling across the table. Half the room glaring, the other half staring down at their laptops like they wanted to disappear. I shut it down, raised my voice just enough to cut through. Enough. We're not doing this here. We'll address workloads and responsibilities later. This meeting is about the sponsorship rollout. Out loud, I kept my composure, but the comment stuck with me. I didn't want to admit it, but part of me wondered if he had a point. In the weeks leading up to Oktoberfest, I told myself we were ready. The training sessions, the planning calls, the endless checklists. I thought I'd drilled the women into the standard they needed to be. I really believed we could run this event flawlessly, prove everyone wrong. Then Oktoberfest finally kicked off. It wasn't just another event, it was the event. 2 full weeks, wall-to-wall beer tents, packed crowds, international distributors, every sponsor we had watching closely. This was supposed to be my moment, the one I'd been building toward. The first day was a mess. Sophie, one of my coordinators, completely botched the permits. Our delivery trucks sat outside the fairgrounds for hours because nobody had the right passes to get them inside. By the time the kegs finally rolled in, half the booths were already running dry. I cornered her by the staging area, trying to keep my voice low but sharp. Sophie, how could this even happen? We went over the permit process 3 times in prep meetings. This is basic logistics. She rolled her eyes like a teenager. Well, maybe if someone actually explained it clearly instead of rushing through slides, I wouldn't have missed a form. My jaw clenched. Are you serious right now? This is costing us thousands. Sophie folded her arms. Don't pin this all on me. Maybe if you didn't expect me to handle everything by myself? She trailed off, muttering something about toxic expectations. I wanted to snap, to rip into her on the spot, but I forced myself to take a breath and keep my cool. Losing it in front of the crew would only make things worse. Then Hannah, who was supposed to oversee promotions, broke down crying behind the tents, said the crowd was too aggressive and that she didn't feel safe handing out samples. I crouched next to her, trying to steady my tone. Hannah, you knew this was part of the job. We talked about crowd control, we practiced the scripts. You can't just disappear during peak hours. She sniffled, shaking her head. Sorry I'm not some strong, unshakable manager like you. Maybe find someone else who's cut out for this. I'm just not. Gaslighting me, turning it around like I was the problem. My stomach twisted with frustration. I wanted to scream, to tell her to pull herself together. But again, I bit my tongue, forced a brittle smile, and reassigned Keith and Joshua to cover her shift instead. Inside, though, I was fuming. 2 disasters back to back, and both of them acting like it was somehow my fault. By the afternoon, tensions were spilling over. Sophie and Hannah got into a screaming match behind one of the beer tents. Something about who was supposed to handle signage versus scheduling. I don't even know. Customers filmed it on their phones, of course, and within hours, the clip was all over TikTok. 2 of my empowered hires, red-faced, swearing at each other in front of stacked kegs. Hashtags like #drama. At Oktoberfest and #girls run the show trending by the evening. By the second night, it was chaos. Booths unmanned, lines stretching down the block, drunk customers booing and chanting for refunds. Someone posted a video of a guy waving a 20 at an empty counter yelling, "Where's the beer?" It went viral. Keith finally lost it. He pulled me aside after covering yet another booth. "Why are they even here?" he asked, jerking his thumb at Sophie and Hannah. "This is Oktoberfest, not daycare. You think sponsors care about representation when the taps are dry?" Joshua chimed in, quieter but sharper. "This is going to cost you, and not just them. If the board thinks you tanked this on purpose just to push your little gender war, don't be surprised if you're out the door." I brushed them off, smug. Told them they were being dramatic, that big change takes time. But I could see it in their faces. They'd written me off already. By day 3, my bosses called an emergency meeting. I walked in already rehearsing excuses about teething problems and high-pressure environments, but they weren't having it. One of the VPs cut me off. We don't care about excuses. We care about PR. We've had 2 sponsors call threatening to pull out. If you don't fix this immediately, it's your head. That's when the unthinkable happened. They ordered me to bring in a backup crew. Not my women, not the team I'd handpicked and trained. A group of contractors, mostly guys, borrowed from one of our competitors' logistics arms. Making that call was the most humiliating moment of my career. I dialed the number with my boss, glaring over my shoulder, practically dictating the words. My hand was shaking, my stomach tight. Every ring of the phone felt like a nail in the coffin of everything I'd tried to prove. The men showed up the next morning like a rescue squad. Within hours, lines were moving, trucks were on schedule, stock was balanced, tents were fully staffed. They didn't argue, didn't break down crying, didn't forget basic logistics. They just got it done. Fast. Efficient. No drama. The contrast was brutal. Sophie and Hannah shrank into the background, red-eyed and sulking, while Keith and Joshua worked seamlessly with the replacements. The crowd relaxed. The hashtags started shifting. By the end of the first weekend, our Oktoberfest booth was running like it should have from the start. One of the replacement guys, a tall, bearded logistics contractor, came up to me while tightening a tap line. He wiped his hands on a rag and nodded toward the chaos that was slowly settling. "So, you're the manager, right?" I straightened my blazer, trying to sound in control. "Yes." "That's me." He chuckled, not unkindly, but with that tone that stung more than if he'd just said it outright. "Heard it's been a mess the last couple days." What happened? I scrambled for words. It wasn't a mess. We just had a few hiccups with staffing. New hires. It's been a learning curve. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. Learning curve? At Oktoberfest. He let out a low whistle. Ballsy. Another one of his crew chimed in while hauling a keg onto a dolly. Look, no offense, but if you're going to experiment, maybe don't do it at the biggest beer festival in Europe. The other guys laughed, not cruelly, just in that easy working man way that made me feel even smaller. I forced a tight smile, pretending I didn't hear the subtext. Well, it's under control now. The bearded guy shrugged. Sure. Thanks to us he winked, then walked off with his crew, moving like a machine. No complaints, no theatrics, just getting it done. I stood there, clipboard in hand, watching them run circles around the team I'd spent months assembling, and for the first time, I couldn't even muster an excuse. Technically, the event was salvaged. We didn't lose it entirely, but the damage was already done. The TikToks, the hashtags, the headlines, those lived on. The press was vicious, and my name was right there in the write-ups. Festival mismanaged under diversity initiative. I thought this was going to be my revolution, my proof that women could outshine men. Instead, it turned into Exhibit A, that they couldn't. Oktoberfest was officially over, and when I walked into the office the Monday after, HR and my VP were waiting. I didn't get fired, but I got slapped with a formal warning and restructured on the spot. Translation: Keith was now heading the events division, with Joshua promoted as his deputy. My new title was technically still manager, but the scope was gutted. Half my team reassigned, half my budget gone. I was left with scraps, side campaigns, secondary venues, things that didn't matter. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I believed in my own story anymore. Sitting there, watching Keith run the meetings I used to lead, was excruciating. He was calm, efficient, decisive. People respected him. The same people who used to snicker behind my back now leaned in when he spoke. But here's the thing. I don't believe for a second that men are inherently better. I can't. That would mean admitting everything I've worked for was a lie. No, the problem wasn't the idea, it was the execution. I just hired the wrong women. Sophie with her attitude, Hannah with her tears. The activists who cared more about slogans than spreadsheets. Of course they failed. They weren't the right kind of women, the right women. Strong, focused, resilient. They're out there. I just have to find them. So while Keith plays boss, I've started making my own little list again. Names from LinkedIn, women I've met at panels, interns who talk about wanting to break into hard industries. I'll bring them in quietly, under the radar, build a new team, a better one. Because one bad Oktoberfest doesn't erase a truth I know deep down. Women are more capable than men. It's just a matter of proving it. And next time, I'll make sure I don't get it wrong.